Oh, there you
What's
are.
up, brother? I'm
How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm very well. You seem to be standing.
I am standing.
Yeah, I want to get into that. Yeah, I really want to get into that. You have a good standing desk, or is it just a different position you're filming at?
You know, I wish I could show you later. I will. I have plyo boxes. So I've created a standing desk with plyo boxes, which is so much easier.
Really?
The way I have it set up, because I can just take it off and sit right back down. But the plyo boxes I have, they're more styrofoam. So you don't break they're not the wood boxes, which is kind of a pain in the ass. They weigh almost nothing. They're super easy. It's.
You really did lose weight. I've been following your Instagram posts, but you lost a lot. You got leaned up very quickly.
Yeah, it was, man, I'm like 40 pounds down from like,
oh my God.
Crazy, right?
I didn't notice. Yeah. I mean, did you lose muscle much?
A little bit. At first, for the first 6 weeks or so, the DEXA scan showed that I gained half a pound of muscle.
Interesting.
Since that point, I've lost about 6 pounds of muscle. The last recording, I'm probably down closer to 10 pounds of total muscle, but still a 3-to-1 ratio, let's say, is not bad. So I know admittedly, I've gone too far into the weight loss. I didn't need to lose this much, but it became more of an experiment and also a way to keep myself focused. You know, I like structure. I really do need that. And it's good testing theories for other things for, men down the road, I think.
Yeah, it's very interesting experiment. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Oh, what up?
It's great to have you on the show.
Hey, I know that guy. I didn't know he was on the show, Mike.
Boom.
Good stuff, man. How you doing?
Good, brother. How are you, man?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Life is good, man. Living at the beach, just like you.
Good to catch up, dude.
I think Chris is living in a better beach. Chris, do you live by San Diego?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I got a couple 3 and 4-year-olds in my house right now, so I'm hiding in my car. But I'm about a block from the beach in front of the house, so yeah.
Hopefully we won't take too much of your time. Chris, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. Mike and I have a podcast called Biohacking and MMA, this is the first time we have a guest on the podcast. But I just want to tell you a bit of background about the channel. The channel is mostly about two things: enhancing performance for sports, but also living a longer and happier life. And because of the second part, I have a history personally in my family and myself with addiction. So I was really so excited that you are our first guest because you have such an inspirational story and a deep story. I thought maybe we could get a bit of a perspective of it from the beginning if you have the time. Oh, I think he may have connection issues.
So yeah, I'll just go ahead. I've caught a bunch of your stuff. I just watched the one with Boston Lloyd.
Nice.
Oh, no way.
That was gnarly, man. That's good that you're getting that stuff out there,
Oh, you're talking about the Shelby Starnes one about the female body?
Yeah, that's rough.
That's one of the things we try to do on the channel is to maybe help people save their lives, especially when they're athletes and taking things they don't know what they are exactly. But just for
God knows I've made a mistake. So, we live and learn, now that I'm in my 40s, I'm trying to play catch up to get myself, to keep and stay as healthy as possible. And one of my things, I don't know if Mike even knows, but I had heart failure. My ejection fraction was at 14 to 15%. And they actually told me I needed a transplant. And I was able to get it all the way up back over 50 and then fight again.
Wow, you got over 50. So I was researching, of course, and I learned the most shocking thing I heard in your story was a 14% ejection. Just for the audience that doesn't know, we have some subscribers who have similar situations. When you go with under 20% ejection fraction, under 30, doctor will tell you that you have heart failure and need a heart replacement, which is one of the scariest things I think you could hear in your life. So you got to that point and then healed back to 50. Usually people get to 35 or so, but won't go back all the way to 50.
Same thing my cardiologist kept telling me. She kept saying, this is amazing. It's a miracle. Most people will make it into the low 30s and then they kind of hit a wall. But yeah, the body's pretty amazing, and I kind of jokingly say, cut out the booze, the cocaine, and the anabolics, and all of a sudden it'll heal itself, but in some ways it's true. In some ways it's more about not doing necessarily all the right things, but not doing the wrong things. In my story, that was a big part of what I did. I also used a bunch of different herbs and supplemented, changed my diet completely, changed where I lived, who I hung out with, all of it, as an entire lifestyle. And, it took 4 years, for it to slowly, it wasn't an overnight thing, but slowly but surely, we brought it back up. Now I got to keep.
What was so interesting, Chris, about what you said about the heart failure is you mentioned alcohol. You said that the doctor, I remember one interview, you said that the doctor told you it could be the alcohol and the cocaine, as well as, of course, everything else. But many people don't know, maybe listening to this, many people have never drank that much, like I used to drink, when you drink in the mornings. When you drink on like a heavy night of drinking, the next day your blood pressure is like 20% higher, and you don't really notice it unless you go to a doctor and they'll tell you, wow, you're 180 over something. It'll sometimes go really high, and your heart rate will also go high the next day. But we tend not to notice it when we're drinking.
Yeah, so you're walking around high compression, and you have no clue. I think I did that obviously for years. Also I think, burning the candle from both ends, because not only was I doing that, but I never skipped a day of training.
Yeah. Mike was telling me about sometimes you'd go into training exhausted and you'd still go through the whole day.
That was one of the things that always stood out about Chris, man. I remember one time you came into the gym, brother, you were purple and puking. And I was like, bro, let's just scrap it. Let's come back later. And you were like, fuck no, coach. Like, I'm here. Let's get this done. It'll make me feel better. And goddamn, that was one of the best workouts I ever saw. Remember, we kept that puke bucket in the middle of in the gym, back in the back room of Team Quest. This kid fucking put in the work, no complaints. Got it done, like blew my mind. I was like, I'll warm up. He's going to be out of here. Fucking crushed the workout. And by the time the workout was over, it was like he just came off the beach, got like a massage and was just fucking ready to roll. It was one of the coolest things I ever saw.
Well, thank you, I guess. I wrote a lot of things. I chalked a lot of things up to willpower, being tough. Hey, I can do it as long as my whole thing was, I'm not going to miss training, and very few times in my life did I ever miss training. Probably a lot of times I should have missed. It probably would have been, it was not beneficial for me to train, but, and that's kind of, the mentality, Mike, and you're familiar with a lot of us combat athletes. We don't necessarily come from from outstanding backgrounds, you know what I mean? And in my case, my motto was, everything in excess, nothing in moderation, go fast, kick ass, chug beers, crank tunes, and put 100% into everything, whether that was partying or training. And, I did it. I definitely did it. My body definitely paid the price, for sure.
Chris, I have a couple of questions about that. In some interviews, you mentioned that you would never miss a training session, irrespective of what was going on. But the reason was because of fear of failure in the ring. So it was like the motivating force was not wanting to be embarrassed, for example, or lose a fight in front of a lot of people. So was fear a driving motivation as opposed to like love?
100% for me. You know what? Fear is fucking motivating, dude. Like, I'm not worried about getting beat up. I'm not worried about getting hurt. Not worried about dying. My fear is looking bad. My fear is my friends and family at home thinking I'm a pussy. Now I'm talking about, now I've done a lot of work on myself. So I mean then, my fear was not being anything, was being what, a tweaker that worked at a gas station, which is pretty much what the world saw as the the best future possible for me. You know, those were my fears, and those were driving factors for sure.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because, sometimes people who don't know alcoholics or don't know much about it will they'll describe it as an issue of greed, or they'll say that the alcoholics and the addicts are cowards, that they fear life and they can't live without substances. I think that your story is one of the most extreme examples to the contrary of that, because if you felt fear, you faced it. I mean, my wife calls you the zombie because we watch a lot of your fights, and I know you're called the crippler, but we call you the zombie because you never turn away from a punch. And my wife was like, I've never seen a guy that's that entertaining to fight. We've been watching your fights for the last week or so. And she watches the UFC. She's a kickboxer. She said, I've never seen anybody like that doesn't turn away. I mean, it's true bravery, something really. The other thing I want to ask you is, did being in the UFC and having all that pressure to fight, did it keep you on the straight and narrow in terms of the alcoholism a little bit? Or did the excess money sort of throw you another direction?
Both. Oh. I think going back to the fear kept me alive, because that was really the only thing I could clean up mostly for 3-4 weeks. I'd start a couple months out, and towards the end of my UFC career, I would have a trainer with me 24 hours a day, basically more as a babysitter than a trainer even. Mike's good friends with Greg. Greg used to come out all the time, and more, he was there to keep me out of trouble. So there was that, but then there was the added money, the fame, and all these things that a kid from the wrong side of the tracks aspires to get. Then they get them, and they don't know what the heck they're supposed to do with them.
Interesting. Just on this, following along with this, before we get into your background, recently some people have been speculating. You know how Conor McGregor's personality seems to have changed over the last 10 years or so. And, recently, sometimes he lets out tweets late at night that are mean maybe and stuff like that. And people have commented saying, he wasn't like that originally, and thinking that maybe the fame and money pushed him in a direction that's not maybe cohesive to his, his health. Do you think that, can you recognize that in your experiences?
Yes, 100%. I mean, fame and money can be great. They can be used for fantastic things, but like anything, money, in my opinion, is power to do a lot of things. And you can do, and power can corrupt absolutely, or it can empower. So it's I've seen guys go both ways. Unfortunately, I'd have to seen more go the direction of the Conor McGregors and stuff. When God knows, I went that way pretty far before, I was able to turn things around, and I think it's a personality thing too, not even in regards to addiction, but fame itself is addicting, and what people do with it can be addicting, with the social media, how they want to portray themselves. I was lucky enough to never really need to get caught up in that too much. I had real addictions to worry about.
Commenting on these couple of notes, so is social media now a thing that young fighters have to focus on to build up their brand? Can they not focus on fights sort of the way you did maybe in 2003, 2004?
Unfortunately, yes. It is a thing they have to focus on. I tell my guys, and I hate to say this, but I tell my guys, listen, you're half professional athlete, WWE star. I mean, you have, in my case, I created some gimmicks without even realizing that I was, with the bright red hair, pointing at the camera, some catchphrases and whatnot that people kind of hooked onto. But you need those things. I mean, the bottom line is it's all about money. If it doesn't make dollars, it don't make sense, and when a promoter's going to put a fighter on their card, especially if they're not the UFC, if scouts and social media know a couple hundred people are going to show up and buy tickets, that makes a difference.
Do you think the Jake Paul and Logan Paul stuff recently has really highlighted that to athletes? Do you think they're becoming more aware of that? How much it's the impetus is on them to build that desire from the crowd to watch them?
There you go. Here's two guys that went the other way. We get these fighters and we have to start to kind of train them and teach them in the ways of social media. Now you got these social media guys that are trying to learn how to be fighters. They do. One complements the other. That's a whole topic for discussion. Jake Paul, his brother. How I think it is for combat sports, in general. But
what do you think of that? Yeah, what do you? Because I actually didn't even ask Mike what you thought of the fight last weekend. I didn't catch up with you either.
Yeah, I thought it was exactly what I thought. We know Woodley, and I'll let Leben jump in here in a second, but we know Woodley, and we've seen athletes. And Chris, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. That we see athletes who are just monsters. They seek violence for a certain point in their career, and then something happens one night. It happened to me even in the few fights that I had, and a lot of other athletes I've spoken with off, behind the scenes. It's just one night, it's just not there anymore. Now, if we took Tyron Woodley and we put him into the Olympic Training Center, the UFC PI, and we tested his strength, his agility, his reaction time, I guarantee you he will be better than he was 5 years or 10 years ago. So it's not a drop off in athletic performance. There's a Q factor that we don't quite understand, but athletes know what I'm talking about when I speak about it. It's just one night they're a different athlete, and then they never seem to be the same. Now, Chris, you recently fought again, and you're the same crazy motherfucker in many ways that for better or worse, right? You still have that, to what Leo said, that move forward, take two shots to give one big one back. You still have that. But how many guys do you know, Chris, that have gone through this? They're just not the same. And you want to give them a hug and say, brother, like it's done. Don't do this anymore.
I would say most. And, listen, you can't unlearn what you've learned. Ignorance in a lot of times is when you're a young fighter and you don't know nothing but go 100%, look for the kill. Then you go out there, you fight a couple of the best guys in the world, and you get slept.
Yeah,
can't unlearn that shot could be there. And I think we saw a little bit of that, in Woodley. He just, for example, when was it second or third round, he had Paul rocked on the ropes. There was about 25, 30 seconds left, and he couldn't bring himself to step into danger and pull the trigger.
Yep.
Now, albeit Paul very likely is one of those fighters that's still dangerous when hurt.
Yep.
But fighting is a gamble. When you get in there, you're continually weighing risk versus reward. And at that time, he needed to take that gamble, and he couldn't bring himself to do it. And that's not a criticism of his skill, but like you said, it's that not being able to unlearn or what he's gone through.
Yeah.
If to both of you guys, because I know so little about professional fighting, when I watched the fight, I was naively, I was thinking that Tyron was, because he was doing this thing where he had a low stance initially with his hands up. It sort of looked like a wrestling stance almost to me, something like that, with a low center of gravity. And then what he seemed to do was he was very careful, and he would throw a punch once in a while and land it and then back off immediately after. I thought he was being very careful. Then other people were speculating online, probably incorrectly, that he was somehow motivated to lose the first fight to get the second fight. And that's why he didn't go in for the kill. But you guys saw something else.
Yeah, I would have to agree with what you saw. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
I think he was too tentative, and and first off, let's get this out. Woodley is, he's got knockout power. A lot of wrestlers do, but he's not a world-class striker.
Okay.
It is
Sure.
what it is. Great fighter, UFC guy. My hat is truly off the Paul. He took the fact that what that kid's done in I think probably he's been training longer than he's letting on. But from what I see. But the amount of fights that he's had, that's the real learning curve. That's the real measuring stick. It's you have to step in there. Like I tell guys, listen, I hate the actual fight itself. People tell you they love to fight. That's bullshit. Listen, I love training. I love the camaraderie of the gym. I love the friendships. I love the bond. I love being a martial artist and developing my skills. The actual fight, and I'm sure Mike would agree with me, it hurts, man. It's stressful. It's a lame day. You're sitting backstage, your stomach's in knots, it's hurry up and wait all day. I can't say that I love that. But the fact that Jay Paul has gone through that pressure cooker only 3 or 4 times and was able to perform after getting hit the way he did, my hat's off to him.
Can I ask you to it's a really simple, maybe basic question. For somebody that's, many of our listeners have been in street fights before, in high school or whatever. How does the pressure and the psychology of a organized fight differ from even like a serious street fight that you know is going to happen?
Good question, dude. Look, you're out drinking, somebody slaps your chick's ass. Next thing you know, hands are flying. That's not a fight. That's not a fight. A fight is, this guy came here to beat the life out of me. I'm here. All the people are sitting there. I'm going to take that long walk. I sat backstage for 3 hours. Now I'm going to take that 5-minute walk, the whole time knowing that me and this guy are going to fight. The whole time trying to control my adrenaline and my anxiety so it doesn't dump right out the gate, which has happened to me plenty of times. It's terrible. And then there's going to be a ref that's going to stand there and let him hit me. Nobody's trying to break this up. There is no way out. A street fight is over before it even happens on all the fights I've ever been in. It's like, wait, somebody's hitting my buddy. Somebody's hitting me. What's going on? 5 minutes later, everybody's laughing over a beer. That was crazy. Yeah. Totally different scenario.
Now, when we started this discussion, you were talking about the backgrounds of fighters. Maybe fighters tend to have more difficult backgrounds. What do you make of the fact that like Jake Paul and Logan Paul seem to have had a normal family background and seem to have a fighting spirit? Is that common, or do you find most fighters had that kind of background that you had and Mike had, and many of us had difficult family backgrounds and so on?
I think he has the desire to prove himself. I mean, you're looking at a Disney star, man. He wants to prove that he's a man. He's also a tough guy. He's not just, having that many people and kind of probably being known as a little bit, the way that society views those kind of celebrities. I would imagine that there's some like, hey, no, I'm a tough dude too. I'm just like everybody else from the block. Never mind that I got money, They sometimes have more motivation than people in my situation do.
Jake Paul, if I'm curious, if Jake and Logan, let's say they did grow up on the other side of the tracks, they had a broken home, they had a tough story, and they didn't get the Disney break, and they found their way into a local shitbox PAL gym in their early teens, let's say, right? Just seeing those guys as they are now, seeing Jake Paul, I don't know enough about Logan, let's say, but a guy like Jake Paul, I think 10 years earlier, if he had a tough luck story early in his career and found his way into the right gym and got a few breaks along the way, that's a guy that we could be speaking about as one of a ranked guy, let's say. Who knows who gets to the top of the mountain? But just from what I see, knowing athletes and being around the sport, Jake's got a few of those parts of his personality. What Chris said earlier, this is a guy who he didn't have to be a boxer. He chose it. And fuck, man, it's tough. It's tough. You can do it once, walk away. Hey, bucket list. I jumped out of the plane. I'm done. This dude just fought Tyron Woodley, right? And 5-time world champ. That's a real dude right there. When Woodley's staring you face to face, and Chris, you remember Woodley used to come up and train with us at Team Quest. Man, Woodley puts his hands on you. You're like, this is a fucking athlete right here. Like, this is a real dude, Olympic Training Center and the whole thing. So it's interesting to see how I think our backgrounds and upbringings in many ways, the nature-nurture principle. I think a guy like Jake Paul, he gets a lot of shit. I think in his heart, he's a fighter, man. Now, he might not ever get to his peak potential because he started relatively late, but I would have loved to see a guy like him start 10 years earlier. Who knows where he would have ended up? And wasn't he a wrestler too? Wasn't he like a high-level high school wrestler, state champ or something along those lines? I didn't know that until rather recently, actually.
Apparently, they were both wrestlers.
Yeah. And that's not an easy sport. You don't go to wrestling because you're trying to get chicks or you're trying to, be famous. Wrestling, I wrestled, right? Chris wrestled. No, wrestling, we were the losers in many ways. We were the degenerates of our school. All the cool kids, they went and played basketball or football or whatever else it was. The wrestlers, we were the bad news bears.
That's it. I think there's definitely the amount of work that they've put into their social media and stuff. Both those brothers are highly motivated and highly driven individuals. You can't say that they're not.
Yeah.
Chris, how did you get into wrestling? Because I know there's an interesting story involving somebody tripping you, which I find to be a very non-conventional way to get into a sport. What happened in 9th grade?
Well, you know what, man? I was a skater, dude. I had never done any team sports, nor did I really have the desire to. But yeah, I got tripped in the hallway freshman year by a jock wrestler, Maya, varsity wrestler at my school, and it pissed me off, and so that was my whole motivation was to beat him. So I joined the wrestling team, and my sophomore year, I beat him for the varsity spot, and he quit.
That's fascinating.
Short, going back, fear and bitterness, they can be driving factors.
Very much so. Yeah, I had the same kind of feelings in those years. Wait, can I ask you a step back? Because I know some of your some of your views about the flu, that we call it the flu, this thing going around. So I know that you have non-conventional views, and I wanted to know, coming from Portland, Oregon, you grew up in Portland in a low economic area. What is Portland like now, and how do you think of it being? Because I know you have interesting views.
Man, I'm going to get some hate for this comment. I went up there about a year ago. There were the fires. Antifa, downtown was boarded up. It was heartbreaking. Yeah. It was heartbreaking. And then I got in an argument with my friend's girl because I said something like, "You can't shoot a guy for wearing a Trump hat," and apparently that was not a good comment for me to say. She locked herself in the bathroom. I don't know that I will go back. Hard to believe I feel safer and more at home in Southern California than I do in Portland, Oregon, where I spent my whole life.
So Portland was way different.
It's always been weird and a lot of hippies. Yeah. But I really felt like, people kind of let everybody do what they wanted to do. We obviously got the country areas with the Hicks and stuff. Everybody seemed to get along. And I don't know if that's just, Portland. I lived in Portland. I lived in Seattle. And I think maybe on, maybe a little bit toned down, but that same sort of thing is happening, across our entire country, right? Where people just can't tolerate other people's views. And for me, that, I really, really don't like that. Yeah, listen, man, believe whatever you want, think whatever you want, put whatever you want in your body, or don't. I don't care. I'm really, and it's not because like I'm righteous. It's because, listen, I'm worried about my tribe. I'm worried about my family, my kids. I don't have time to worry about, whether this guy wants to take a vaccination or not. Doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? So but people they don't seem to want to do any sort of charity work or anything, but they'll get on social media and voice these political views, like they're so righteous and motivated, but I don't see them ever doing anything altruistic normally.
And Chris, do you identify now more conservative or more liberal, considering what's happening in the world? And reason is, we had a conversation, you may or may not remember, that was a kind of a political conversation in maybe the 04-05, when, George Bush was really coming down with what we felt then to be a bit of a nanny state, right? More homeland security and things like that. And you came across as being, like, to me, much farther to the left than I was. I was identified as more like, I'm a moderate. I'm more conservative on family values, but I'm rather liberal. Smoke weed, have sex with who you want. Like, I don't care about that stuff, but more like fiscally conservative. And I do like the family values. I don't like the excessive pornography that my children have access to. I like a little bit of more of a puritanical mindset in society. I think that's a good governor. But point is, now that I hear you speak, it's interesting, because now Portland is ultra liberal, progressive liberal, and you're far right of Portland. So that conversation I just remembered back to that initial conversation when you were like, man.
Crazy to think, right?
Yeah.
If Chris Leben is telling you you're too liberal, like, dude, there's something wrong, because I'm pretty much good with everybody and everything.
Yeah.
So, where do I identify? Listen, man, I didn't much like the last president. I don't much like the one we got now. Yeah. What I mean?
I'm with you.
I do, unfortunately, I somewhat keep up on world politics. I try not to. I really try not to. I try to change the world one person at a time by who I can affect directly. That is my personal view. That is what I tell myself. I try to, interact with, I have a core group of men that I'm very active with, that a lot of people call me and reach out to me for help and advice. That's hard to believe too, I bet, if you knew me back then, but
you always had great advice though, man. You always, I bet your ear a few times. I remember, and you always had great advice. You had great experience, and you always spoke honestly, which is fucking rare, man. And I was an outsider when I came out there, and you, whether you know it or not, you accepted me before anybody else did, which was amazing to me. I'm all alone, me and my wife. We didn't know anybody on the West Coast. And Leben invited me to your house the first day you met me, the Evan Tanner fight. Evan was fighting Dave Terrell. And you're like, oh, dude, come to my house, watch the fights. Like, come on. I was like, holy shit. Like, this is a cool, like, who does it? You didn't know me. Like, fucking, so there. But you always had great advice. You might not have always taken your own advice.
There you go.
You always had great advice, man. So much respect to you again, my friend.
Thank you. So getting back to the politics, and where I stand, I try not to put myself anywhere, and I try not to think about it on more than an individual. There's there's some issues we could split some hairs on that I kind of come down to going, you know what, dude? There's people way smarter than me on both sides of this issue. I don't know, how to solve the crisis we're in right now, our financial crisis. Should they hand out more money, not hand out less, give unemployment, not give unemployment? Listen, man, I'm not I'm definitely not a financial advisor, and and I'm certainly not an economics major. So I don't know the right answer. I hope somebody can figure it out.
Chris,
ask how to throw a jab,
Exactly. Chris, I wanted to ask you about a little bit about your background, your childhood when you were growing up in Portland, because I grew up without a mother and Mike grew up without a father. I want to ask both of you really, when you grew up without a father, so when I grew up without a mother, I never really thought about it. Like I never thought about, my friends have another person in their house and it's different. They get more support or whatever. Did you guys grow up feeling it because it's different being not having a male figure? To either.
That's funny. I didn't, but now that I have a 3, almost 4-year-old sitting inside that house and I'm dad, I find myself commonly thinking about what I missed, and how much I love being part of his life and being that father role model to him, and I realized looking back in hindsight that those moments that I have with him that I didn't have, a lot of those moments affected me deeply. Of course, at the time, I could have never put that together, but now I see the importance of having, both parents, access to both parents. And if you're real lucky this day and age, both parents may be even in the same house.
Yeah. What about you, Mike? Did you notice the absence when you were growing up?
I did notice it, but my childhood was, it was rough because my father had a massive stroke, ripped out of the house. He eventually died of heart attack. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and then she was thrust into the workplace, working menial jobs, cleaning houses, and just like part-time. So she was working like 3 jobs, 3 shifts, let's say. She was never home. I give her credit for the amount of work she was putting in, but she couldn't make ends meet. So our heat was shut off, our electricity was shut off. We had no running water. Windows would break in the house and they wouldn't get fixed for years. We had a hole in our roof that would literally, when it would rain, it would leak into the back half of our house. And we built like a tarp to funnel it out the back of our house like a waterfall. So that's the way I grew up. And, I started working at 8 years old, cleaning boats. I was called a dock rat. I live at, on the marina, and I would make $2 a day, working 3, 4, 5 hours so I could eat. Mm-hmm. So at 8 years old, 9 years old, I was completely in charge of feeding myself and buying food for myself and then buying food for my family. And man, my mother gave me work ethic, I do believe. Not having the father, I always felt an absence. I felt the void. But in many ways, I think I was able to channel that into positive. I had a few opportunities to go down the dark road. And I kind of like dabbled my foot in, but it never stuck with me, whether it's through crime or through violence or through substance abuse. I always felt the responsibility to be the man of the house. I remember going around my neighborhood, like grabbing sticks so I could build a fire in my dining room. We had this old defunct fireplace so I could put heat in my house for my sisters and my younger brother. So I think it wouldn't be ideal. Now, just like Chris, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I have 2 daughters. And not having a father, I think, has dramatically improved my ability to be a father and to be present and to be aware and to understand how many opportunities I have to instill in them things that I wish I had. And it's hard, though, and then you guys can all kind of maybe share that I have a tendency, I want to do everything for my daughters while I know that I can't. I have to allow them to be autonomous and independent and to fail. And I have to put them in positions where they will fail and dust themselves off and get back. And so I'm playing that role now, that tension of opposites, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't change anything personally, because that's my upbringing made me who I am and where I am. And I've been able to travel the world and meet these great people. And who knows, if I had a normal lifestyle. If I had a normal life, I think I'd be sitting behind a desk somewhere, writing clinical dietitian, feeding ensures to, sick people in a hospital. And I would hate probably every moment of my day. That's what I think. I would have gone very Johnny traditional Americana, and I would probably be a miserable, successful person. So that's just my thought as I stand here now.
You commented on something really interesting, which is this. I've noticed that sometimes children that grow up with an overbearing father, especially father, will be introverted and less willing to risk mistakes because they always had that force behind them, that confidence force to be there with them. And once they get into college or whatever, they don't have that anymore. So, and sometimes I notice men who grow up without a father have that confidence that's built out of sometimes having to be the man of the household. But Chris, you had an elder brother, didn't you?
I did.
You did, right? So did that remove some of the feeling maybe of responsibility or like pressure off you a little bit?
No.
No,
Not at all. I'll tell you what though, Mike, what you just said is what you guys both just said, so interesting to me, being that this is, a question that I ask myself, now being a father, not being overbearing, allowing my child to fail. I want him to be hard, but I don't want him to be hard. I don't want him to be tough. Trying to find that balance, man, as a parent is a trip, because I know I'm pretty tough, and so I would imagine that I'll probably be a little tougher on him than mom, and, trying to find the balance there. But anyways, going back to, my older brother was, he was an asshole. So, I think, if you talk to him, he is the reason I'm a UFC fighter, was him beating me up all the time when I was little, and he was, we're good now. Our relationship is great. And even he will tell you, he was not a nice guy.
Interesting. So
he
you had that kind of...
pretty... Once he turned, 12 or 13, he's only 18 months older than me. He was nice until we were, 10, 11. And then at 12, went through that shift and he became an asshole. And he was like that for the next, till I got out of the house.
And your mother, I heard in some of your interviews, worked as a bartender at that time, right?
Yeah, so my mom is an interesting story too. She certainly had her own set of baggage and her own rough childhood coming up, and now that I'm older, I look back and she did, I think, the best that she was capable of doing with my brother and I. But, she worked nights as a bartender. And if she wasn't working at the bar, that's where she was.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that, there wasn't any sort of really abuse in my house. It was just neglect. It was just there, we lived, when we lived on Mount Hood, it was, no food, no water, sometimes no electricity sometimes in that house. And we had to fend for ourselves more or less. And then we moved to Portland, when we moved to Portland, it was kind of the same thing, drugs were a major factor in her story, and making sure that I had a nice square dinner was not her priority, or that I was dressed and ready to go to school was not a priority, So I learned at an early age, I'd catch the bus, get off at Fred Meyer's, steal some clothes, steal some food, get back on the bus, go to school, and that's how I got through middle school and high school. And
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
So I was going to ask because I grew up with both. I mean, my father was an alcoholic. My mother was a drug addict, but I wasn't around her that much. But I got some interesting outcomes from it that I still don't understand how they affected me. But one thing, for example, I want to ask you: when you grow up and the only people close to you, your mom and her siblings, are using or drinking often, on a daily basis, and you don't really see other people that often. So basically, to you, I imagine, to me at least, everybody did this every night. And I never saw somebody drink like a glass of wine with dinner. It was like 3 bottles or 6 bottles at night, or, something throughout the day. So I think, like, when I grew up, I hated alcohol because I thought that it was the reason why my dad had a difficult life. So I blamed it for his problems. But later, when I stopped believing in myself and I started drinking myself, I noticed I went from, drinking very little to immediately the same habit as my dad. Like, it's as if it imprinted on me when I was younger and I saw it. Did you ever think that happened to you yourself? Like, it imprinted on you that you never had a chance to see how somebody may use drugs or alcohol sparingly?
I think so. As a matter of fact, I remember the epiphany. And for me, it was after that first season of The Ultimate Fighter came out, and I was sitting at my friend's house watching the episode for the first time. And everybody on, here I am getting loaded, still training, and, fighting with everybody, pissing on some kid's bed, shit that I'll never stop hearing about, but to me, that was just a regular night, man. That wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And then, you hear, the other fighters talking like, what's he doing? This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and he's getting loaded, John had 1 beer, somebody had 2 drinks, Chris drank the whole bottle, I went from sober to drunk so quick, I didn't notice that everybody was talking shit about me, if that makes sense, so being able to soberly sit back and watch that and kind of reflect, from an outside perspective, looking in at myself, it was like, boom, like, wow, I have a problem with alcohol. Before that, I didn't think in the slightest that I had a problem.
But no, we skipped over one very interesting thing about your story, is that at one point you joined the military and yep, very quickly left the military mysteriously. And I think that you had some experience in a military jail, which I'm very curious to know what a military jail is like. But I want to know, what was the story of why you joined and then left so early? And I think it might have something to do with wrestling.
Yeah. I had a couple colleges that approached me to wrestle for that. However, when I graduated high school, I couldn't read whatsoever.
I was going to ask you about this. How did you graduate high school? I needed to ask you about that. How did you graduate high school without being able to fully read and write well? How did they pass you? Oh, it cut off a bit.
It's that you do develop, not learning how to, in a lot of ways, I think it was beneficial for life. I learned how to cheat and make friends and look on other people's papers and get that work turned in one way or another. Things are obviously a lot more different now than when I was in school. Now I think they'll just pass anybody. Back then, if you went, I got, I at least got C's, and there was a lot of cheating and copying and everything I could possibly do, but I got the work turned in, and I graduated high school. And I think to this day, the only person in my family, brother, uncles, cousins ever to have done that. So,
wow, congratulations!
Good.
And then, so you said a couple of colleges wanted you to play for them, but you decided to go to the military?
Yeah, talked to the recruiter. He said he'd send the guys out to watch me wrestle. Came back, talked to him. He said, yeah, they watch you wrestle. You're good. You can wrestle for the military. Whether they did or not, I don't know. But long story short, I went to, I was going to be a helicopter mechanic, 67 Tango. I went to basic training, did well, went to AIT, did well, had, perfect scores on my physical fitness test and shooting and whatnot. And so I ended up going to airborne school. And I went 82nd Airborne, got out of there to North Carolina and got stayed sick, working on aircraft. I went to my first sergeant and said, hey, I want to try out for the wrestling team, and he's like, oh no, we're going to be deploying in like a year. I need you in this position. We need you. You can't even try out. And, obviously nothing I'm proud of, but you're talking about a 20-year-old Chris LEBEN. And I was like, wait, what, work? like you want me to work 12 hours a day for the next 6 years? Fuck that. I was trying to wrestle, So I got in my car. I drove across the country in like 56 hours. That was back when ephedra was still legal. You could pick it up at the truck stops. Yeah. Just kept on ephedra and Mountain Dew, man. And ended up getting in the Civil War game was going on in Corvallis. The Ducks versus the Beavers football game. Went down there, got in a frat fight. Got thrown in jail. Spent a week or 10 days or something in jail down there. They let me out on my own. They let me out with a plane ticket and said, you got to fly yourself to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and turn yourself into jail. And that may have been one of the drunkest I ever was when I showed up at the airport there at 10. They told me if I didn't show up, it's going to be like 20 years I'd be stuck, And then it'd be a month or so. I was in military jail, which was horrible in Fort Sill. It was winter. It was these old barracks, like World War II barracks, no windows in them. And, they gave our more or less made us stand outside. Then they'd put us on a cattle truck. We would drive down. We would stand at attention in line for lunch, go back, come back, do it again for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And sometimes it was multiple hours just standing at attention, waiting to get in to eat in 10 minutes. Wow. And then we'd stand outside for the rest of the day until they let us come inside and go to sleep.
Wow, that's crazy. I've never talked to someone who's been in a military jail. I didn't know what they do there. I thought they did some weird stuff like making people stand.
They don't have rules, that's for sure. I remember the guy saying there was no fences, nothing. He's like, look, man, you can try to run if you want, but it's 20 miles to the closest road, and you're in the middle of an artillery base. So,
There's actually there's some kind of prison in Abu Dhabi that's like that also. They don't have walls, and it's in the desert. So they tell you can run away, but you're going to die of thirst. There's nowhere you're going to go. So you got to stay with them. So Chris, how did you end up at Team Quest where you met Mike after you left the military?
Well, funny story, so I first trained my junior year in high school one time with Mike and I's coach, Robert Follis. And then fast forward the whole military thing. I get out of military jail, right? I graduated high school, did about a year in the Army, get out of Army jail. And my brother is a used car salesman. And he calls me and he says, dude, I got a job at this new car lot, and Randy Couture and Matt Lindland are kicking the shit out of each other in the garage. And at the time, I was a huge fan. There was nowhere to train in Portland. Randy was the world champion. And I was like, wait, what? Fuck, I'm on my way. So immediately drove down there and ran into my coach, Robert Follis, signed up immediately, and the next day, and he used to have this story he liked to tell, from that day forward, from the day I signed up for the next 6 months, he'd say, hey, Chris, how you doing? When I would walk in the gym, and I'd say, good, did you give me a fight yet? Good, did you give me a fight yet? And so I think I ended up fighting within 6 months of beginning training. And that was it, man. I was hooked, I remember fighting for the FCFF and went out there and ended up winning my fight against a tough guy, and the crowd was cheering for me. And then the next day there was this underground forum. Back then it was forums, and there was like 10 people online talking about my fight. And dude, I was hooked. That was it. I was going to be a professional fighter or bust.
I never knew there were online forums for MMA. We have the same thing for powerlifting and bodybuilding and stuff. So how did that take you to The Ultimate Fighter? Which, for the audience that don't know, there's a TV show, and Chris LEBEN was on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, in which you got to explain it to me. Does the winner of the TV show or the winner of the Ultimate Fight Nights get into The Ultimate Fighter eventually? Into the UFC, sorry.
So, well, on the first season, we didn't know what the heck was going on. We didn't even know if the show was going to air. Now, the way it's worked, is they're fighting for the winner gets a better contract.
Interesting. I think his connection is getting a
fair
little
amount of contracts to guys off the show. Whether Choppy, you got me?
Yeah. Hey, Chris. It's gotten a bit more choppy along the way, but I think it's tolerable. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every 5 minutes or so, it does give us about a 30-second pause, but it seems like we're still catching your story where you kind of, where we pick you up, where we can make sense of it, and then you go great.
Oh, my internet would work out here in the car. I could go inside, but you might have a little bit of noise in the background.
No, we can film it. We'll film another time if you're willing to come on again, and we can continue. But we'll continue now. But I mean, if something's unclear, I have so many questions for you. Mike told me I can't ask all of them today, so hopefully we can have you back on sometime.
All fascinating, by the way.
So I hope you're ready.
So Chris, we missed out, but you were saying that originally it was they were participating for a better contract, but you said now it's sort of stabilized. What is it like now?
No, so originally we weren't sure. We thought just the winners maybe were going to be in the UFC. But what it became was that the majority of the people on the show end up getting in the UFC. The winner gets the good contract, which back then they called a 6-figure contract over the course of 9 fights. So it really wasn't that great then.
I see. And you participated in all the original Ultimate Fight Nights. I think there's 6 of them.
Yeah, I think at least the first 5, maybe 6. You probably did your homework. I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to look into them. I know less about the individual fighters, but I wanted to ask you about a couple of those fights individually. One is the Anderson Silva fight, which you've mentioned before is the hardest you've ever been hit. You said that you had gotten hit, I think, in the head, and then you came to seeing a knee coming to your head, and then lost your memory for the next few hours or so. Did that fight affect your confidence in the ring? I didn't see it I never saw your confidence change, to be honest, but I'm just asking, how did that impact you psychologically?
Well, first off, he dropped me with punches, and I probably could have stayed down. I think most people would have, but at the time I was, I wanted to give him a fair kill, so I got up and turned, and you could see I didn't even put my hands up, and then it was a flying knee to my face that really knocked me unconscious good. But what I noticed is that my style of fighting will beat 99% of people. Going straight forward and just swinging and slugging. But I noticed that I had to add a few things in, a little bit of movement, a little bit of head movement, some setups, possibly. I know this all sounds crazy, right, Mike? But yeah, I had, so I had to, in some ways, take 2 steps back and relearn some things so that I could progress past the point that I was at. And having done that, I won my next one, and then I lost another 2. And that was really part of that learning curve.
On one of those fights, it was with Michael Bisping. Afterwards, you tested positive for stanozolol, which is Winstrol, which is something we talk about a lot on the channel. Probably like 20% of my listeners have used Winstrol before, so it's a common topic. But I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that, because I know you're an open book. One is when you tested positive for Winstrol, do you think it was a calculation issue where you thought the half-life was shorter than it was, and was that the main issue, or were you being reckless sort of with it?
It was a calculation issue.
And because it seems interesting to me to choose Winstrol by itself. Were you using something other than Winstrol also, and the Winstrol is just what showed up?
No, and I hear people say that, I'll be honest, Winstrol works freaking amazing for my body. I mean, and if you look, Mike can probably remember, if you look at the transformation that my physique made, it was freaking blatant that was on Winstrol for that fight. If you look previous Chris Lieben versus Michael Bisping, and then the next Chris Lieben, I mean, you could see, what the androgens were doing.
Interesting. And is it a pretty common, at least in those days, was Winstrol a preferred PED among fighters? Because the reason I ask is for powerlifters, a lot of people don't like Winstrol because their joints start to ache. Now, it depends on the person. Maybe yours didn't, but I'm just curious if it is popular in general.
I think so, right? Michael Johnson, obviously, a lot of guys.
Cyborg.
There's obviously the dried out joints and stuff, but when you can't gain body weight, you're limited, and you certainly don't want to be holding water. You're limited to your choices.
Very true, very true. Now, on the Mark Munoz fight, you tested positive for painkillers, oxycodone, oxymorphone. I wanted to ask you about this. I mean, this was in 2011, a bit later, but I wanted to ask you about this because were you suffering at the time from chronic pain? Did it start to build up? You had injuries that were nagging at you, or was this more of your, substance use days?
I used to like to tell people that, but the fact of the matter is, listen, your shoulder hurts, take a pill for that. Old lady and a bitch, take a pill for that. Fucking stressed about my fight coming up, take a pill for that. Hungover, take a pill for that. Getting ready to go out, fuck, I'll take a pill for that. I mean, that's what it became. It became a cure-all. And in that case, I used to get a big calendar and put it on my wall. Today I'm only going to take 6 Oxycontin 30s, and I'd work those down, and then I'd get to Percocet, and I'd work those down to Vicodin. By the time I showed up to the fight, I was waking up in the morning and drinking, half a bottle of NyQuil and a couple of ibuprofen, because they can't, test for that, right? And in that case, I had done all that. And then there was some issues going on with my camp between my trainers. My old lady was there. It was hectic. It was a main event fight. I was super stressed out. She showed up with my meds. I didn't even bring them with me for the first week I was over there. And she showed up like the day before the fight. And I was like, fuck it, just give them to me. I don't care. And that goes back to kind of what we were talking about with how crazy addiction is. I knew I was going to get caught. And here's a guy that would never miss a training session, that had the fucking motivation, that wasn't physically addicted at that exact moment. And I still made that choice. And I took a year-long suspension for that. Not to mention completely freaking blasted on social media, and I let a lot of people down. That fear that I have of fighting and letting people down, I did that at that exact moment when I took those pills, because I did not have the power to not when they were in front of me, when she showed up with them. Now, if that doesn't put addiction in a different perspective to people that think it's a weakness, I don't know what could,
Yeah. There's also like there's a temptation to analyze it as like a self-sabotage thing, like almost because you'd worked up to that point, you have it there, and you can give up on your shot to test yourself. Like if you take it, there's less of I assume, like a failure or success pressure on you. I don't know. I'm just trying to relate it from my experiences. Sometimes I did similar stupid things. Like I had an important meeting. I had stopped drinking for a week or so. And then the night before, for some reason, I feel some weird pressure. I start drinking. I end up tipsy the next day. But it happens right before the event, usually for me. I don't know if it happened to you like that too.
That is a very common story that you will hear in addiction, and it all ties together. our feelings of self-worth, that tendency to not feel worthy. Maybe there's some of that, the big main event of the show.
Yes.
Me when my family's at home suffering, and broke and poor, and you know what, that self-sabotage, we don't realize it obviously at the time, but it's very real, and it's very common, particularly in people with addiction issues. They have self-worth problems.
Yeah, that's what it struck out to me as a self-worth thing. Like, you don't believe you deserve it. So like you know what I mean? That's the same feeling I had exactly. Now, asking you about the Uriah, because you made two comebacks, or you attempted to make two comebacks. The first one was rejected because of your heart failure. But then later you made a comeback in Bare-knuckle, and you performed excellently and retired on a high note there. But I believe that the reason you wanted to make those comebacks was because of the Uriah Hall fight. Is it the Uriah Hall fight that you didn't like how it ended? Or you feel like you left your career on your own terms?
Yeah, man. That's kind of a heavy one for me to talk about,
We don't have to.
No, it's all right. I think people should hear it, being a guy that, live by the sword, die by the sword kind of fighter, that for me, it was always important that I went out there and put on a war, for the crowds, for the fans, that I went out there and fought the way I think people are supposed to fight. Yeah. And, when I fought Uriah Hall, I quit on the stool, and so if you don't know what that means, if you're listening, that means I didn't answer the bell. So I fought, in all honesty, I was definitely losing, but I wasn't doing horribly bad. I'd lost a lot worse multiple times and came back to win fights. And I just didn't answer the bell, man. I did enough. My heart wasn't in it. I just didn't have, I was fighting for money at that time. My life outside of the cage was a wreck. I was having, issues with my chick. I was having, alcohol and drug issues, and my heart just wasn't there. And for a guy like me to have finished his career on that fight, it left a real tarnish on me, on my feeling of self-worth and of what I had done in martial arts, what I had accomplished. And it was a tough pill to swallow. And I wouldn't say that you can ever right or wrong, I mean, hopefully we learn from it and everything, I like to believe everything happens for a reason. That's why.
Just to interrupt, but I also don't think one wrong can undo so many rights. I mean, you were such a remarkably brave fighter for so long. I'm sorry, it's just my opinion. Because my wife and I watch you in amazement. I mean, the guy doesn't turn down from punches. I mean, it's everything everybody wants to see in a fight, So I just want to say that.
There's also saying you're only as good as your last fight. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, but it hurt. It did hurt, and when I first started getting sober and tried to come back to Bellator, I wanted to address that, and unfortunately, I was not able to because of the heart. Fast forward a couple years down the road, I remember my cardiologist telling me, wow, you're at the low end of what I would consider normal for a man your age. And I said, well, would you let me fight? She goes, you can do anything a healthy man can do, and that's about the time Bare-knuckle called, So, I never stopped training, not one day. They had put me on a no exercise whatsoever. I remember the doctor being like, did you walk up the stairs to get in here? You didn't take that? I'm like, yeah, I just got done training. And he's like, there's no way, And so, when I got sober, I had I would go in and roll jujitsu until I would turn white. And my coach Barrett Yoshida would kind of be like, "Oh, you need Chris, sit one out. You got to sit out." He'd make me sit out and wait. You know, Jim made me sign an extra waiver. Wow. You know, died on the mat. You know, but I didn't stop training for a single day, and I think that was a part of my recovery.
So, wait, cut off. I don't know if you're still talking, but let's wait to see if he. That's a very.
Yeah, you guys.
Yep.
Oh, hey, Chris. So you were saying part of the reason, the theme of your sobriety was getting back to being healthy, so that you could, so that you could leave on the note that you wanted to leave. Was that one of the motivations to getting sober as well?
Nope.
Oh no.
Nope. That was a byproduct of getting sober, and it was a wonderful byproduct. But yeah.
So that's what I wanted to ask you is, what was the driving motivation? Because you did something incredible. I mean, Mike, I don't know if you know the details, but he was sober for a few months, couple of runs through, which is really difficult when someone tries to get sober. They have 6 months or 9 months and something goes wrong. And now he has, from the last interview I saw, over 2.5 years. I think you must be at 3 or so. This is like an insane accomplishment to be completely sober for that period of time. And it requires so much from within a person. You know, your family can't do it for you, your friends can't, nobody can wish it for you. You have to wish it yourself. I want to ask you, Chris, what was the driving motivation to become sober? I often find that it's love, that somebody has love for someone else or something else. And sometimes it's rock bottom and hating yourself or who you've become. What was your main motivations?
I wouldn't say love, and it certainly wasn't to fight. You know, it wasn't fun anymore. It was painful. And, you know, I had lost, rock bottom, man. I had lost, everything. My phone wasn't ringing anymore. I wasn't at the club party, and I was just drinking a bottle of vodka on my couch by myself. I didn't want to go out and drink around people. I just wanted to get my alcohol, my drugs, and go home. Yeah. And be left alone. And it was dark. It was lonely. It was painful. I was accomplishing nothing. I was in and out of jail, multiple DUIs, fights. You know, the last time I spent 6 months down here in San Diego, being in jail, finally, I had been ordered multiple times to go to Alcoholics Anonymous by court. I've been ordered in Washington, I've been ordered in Hawaii, I've been ordered in Oregon, and I've been ordered in California. And, it never worked. It never worked because I didn't want it to work. Finally, when I used to go to this meeting, and I would go to this noon meeting, and then I would come home and fucking cry and sit on my couch right here and drink a pint of vodka because my anxiety was so bad. I had to drink a pint of vodka before I went back into the gym to teach class, to be around people. That's how fucking bad it was. Yeah. I did not want to drink, and I could not drink. I had to have it, and I'll tell you what, I never want to go through that again. Yeah.
There's not. Did you used to get the delirium tremens in the morning too, the shaking and all that from the alcohol?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like that. If anyone listening has been fortunate enough not to experience this, you should never experience it. It's a horrible, horrible feeling, and it really affects your psyche. It makes the anxiety worse and worse the more dependent you become on the alcohol, and then the second you're not on it, it's a crazy, crazy feeling of anxiety.
God forbid you got to go to the store at 8:00 in the morning and fucking
shaking and hoping that the guy working at the store doesn't notice how much you're shaking when you're buying, because you don't want to embarrass yourself, right?
6:30 in the fucking morning. Yeah. Exactly. Then I would stand at my sink, mix it 50-50 with Gatorade, and try to chug some of it and just hold it down without throwing up.
To get it fast in the system.
Once it came down though, I was good.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I know.
Down, you'd be okay.
Well, congratulations, Chris, on making such a huge change in your life. Well, I want to ask you about bare-knuckle. So I don't know anything about bare-knuckle. So for those that don't know, Chris came back and made his return in bare-knuckle, performed wonderfully, left on a high note. And now you're also refereeing, I think, in bare-knuckle, but also maybe involved in the administration. You're in the organization somehow, right?
Yeah, so I do some work for them. You know, my main focus as far as reffing goes is definitely mixed martial arts. You know, last weekend I was in Arkansas, you know, repping a pro show out there. I work for the commission here in California. I just started doing some stuff for CSAC, and I'm hoping that they will move me up in some fashion soon enough. And, you know, one day, you know, hopefully not too far off, you'll see me, you know, UFC, Bellator, LFA, you know, all those bigger pro shows, you know, right there, judging, reffing, working for them.
I hope so, but I wanted to ask you about bare-knuckle. So there's some things I'm curious about. One is, some people have said, like Joe Rogan was mentioning on his show, that bare-knuckle may be more, less damaging for traumatic brain injuries to the head, for CTE and stuff like that. Because I guess having by the way, you use snooze too. I've noticed that. So you're a fellow snooze user. Here's my.
That was my question for you.
Exactly. This is wonderful. Yeah.
I know that it's part of your, you had a lucid dreaming protocol. I saw that was part of it. And then, big fan of lucid dreaming, by the way. That's interesting. As I got sober, all of a sudden I wasn't passing out. I was going to sleep and started lucid dreaming quite a bit, and that turned into some interesting other things with mindfulness and whatnot. But bare knuckle question before we.
Oh, but real quick about that. You know what's funny about getting sober? When you get sober, you realize that you were not having REM sleep for the last 10 years because you don't have dreams when you're drunk, you know, at night. So suddenly you start having dreams and you're like, whoa, there's a whole other world I wasn't experiencing. I know what you mean. But about bare knuckle, so is it actually less like power per blow because of the reason I ask is this: when I watched your fights, I saw that you guys have really thick wrapping around the wrist. I guess so the wrist doesn't break, but doesn't that make you able to punch with more force or not so much?
No, it does. It's worse. It's worse in every way. Listen, it sounds real nice to go, yeah, because they'll break their hand. But listen, you're in a fight, dude. You're throwing as hard as you can. You know what I mean? Now you just have no padding on.
Yeah, like, that's what I would have thought. Exactly.
To be honest. Not to mention, like you said, what they make us do in Florida is wear a neon wrap. So you wrap with tape, then you put this neon wrap around it, then you put more tape around that. Now you go backstage and start working out and sweating, and now this thing is like holding a Coke can with just your knuckles exposed.
Wow.
Oh, did I lose you?
No, you're still there. It's just the video. Yeah, you're there.
There we go. So yeah. Great for your hands, not so good for your face, you know.
Okay, interesting.
The that I lost, which in my mind is debatable, but
it is debatable. You know, I watched that one. Yeah.
I was happy that you know, I went out and fought a 5-round war. I definitely wanted one of those where I didn't quit, you know, because initially he broke my orbital here and cut me under the eye, and then they had to stitch my nose back here, and then I had something like 32 stitches up here where it kind of looks like Harry Potter up here above my eye. So this whole side of my face was just filleted open and kind of smashed in, you know. And I posted the picture at some point on my social media. You could take a look and see that that's not the kind of damage that comes from a UFC fight. I mean, it's gnarly.
So what inspires people to want to, because I know bare knuckle boxing is a growing sport. What inspires young guys who haven't already been in MMA? Are there people that want to be in bare knuckle specifically?
There's getting to be more. And let's face it, you know, if in my opinion, if you're an old UFC Bellator guy, you know, and then making some money, you know, fighting bare knuckle, you know, could be a great option. listen, if you're a young up and coming fighter and you're not going to make it to one of these bigger shows, you might be able to grab some cash and bare-knuckle, do a handful of fights. Hopefully you don't take that much damage, maybe if you're a lighter weight or something. But if you think you have the caliber to be a professional boxer or a UFC Bellator guy and you're in your early 20s, stay away. And the reason that is just is and they might get mad at me, but the scar tissue, man, the lacerations, those stay with, you even flick me anymore, and I bleed just because there's so much scar tissue above my eyes.
That's one of the questions I had for you, actually, that I think maybe we could get to on another time we talk. But when you get a laceration, real quick, when you get a cut in a fight, does that cut become more likely to be opened in the next fight if you get hit in the same place?
Yeah, especially, if, there's some things you can do, vitamin E, massage it, try to rub it out. Because if it adheres to the bone, when you get that real hard, that will cause it to split more. If you get that real hard scar tissue, that tends to split more, so you got to try to break it down as much as you can, because you want your skin to be pliable and elastic.
You've mentioned also
go ahead.
Sorry.
A few years ago, Nate Diaz had surgery because he has so much scar tissue, like Chris is saying. He would just get flicked and he would just bust open. He was losing fights because of the blood, not because he was hurt per se. The commission will only allow so much blood to be seen, the cut to look a certain way. So Nate and a few other fighters, Nate probably being the most famous, went and had surgery to reduce the scar tissue so he could simply go back and fight longer, at a higher level. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know about Chris, because Chris has had some fights called off because of bleeding. And I wonder, as a fighter, when you get that kind of bleeding where you can't see, does it annoy you? Because you might not be actually spent and you might not be actually beat up, but you can't see. Or maybe they call it even if you can see. How does that feel like, Chris, in a fight when you're bleeding? But are you ever bleeding and not really in pain and not?
Well, it's heartbreaking more than anything, obviously, which is why I'm a big fan of head stomps and not elbows. I like the old pride rules. I'm sure Mike remembers those,
Of course. Because
if you finish a fight by soccer kicking somebody, that's exciting. But you're fighting a title fight and all of a sudden, boom, little elbow slides through and then wait time, bring doctor, and then leave it all. It's so dramatic, It is a part of fighting, though, I would say I've been hit by elbows or cut real bad. I've never even known it until I just feel the hot blood coming down, and then I'm like, oh, I'm bleeding. Doesn't hurt.
What about the judging? Because I'm interested, because I know you're very passionate about refereeing. I don't know who judges UFC fights. I've always wondered how do they apply to it and who becomes the judges. But what I wanted to ask Chris is, do you think the judging is always objective? And also, secondly, my understanding since I've been researching is that the judge, if there's no clear winner, they're supposed to pick, I think, the guy who, number one, inflicted the most damage, and number two, controlled the match, right? Those are the two things they consider, right? But recently, when I've been following the UFC on the weekends for the last six, 7, maybe a few months actually, but last 8 weeks or so, there have been a few fights where sitting there, I don't understand how they called it the way they did. Have you ever had that happen to you? And what do you think of the judging in general?
Yeah, well, and I am a judge.
Oh, you are a judge.
I'm a licensed judge. I judge regularly. And what I will say, the unfortunate thing is not all states are created equal. The criteria that we have here in California to be a judge is a lot higher than Texas, Florida. I don't want to get myself in trouble. There's some other states where it doesn't seem to take as much to be a judge, and I think that people don't truly understand the rules. Because, yeah, absolutely, like you said, we score a fight in a 9 fashion, and your number one criteria is damage and intent to finish the fight. You don't score on anything if there's a clear-cut winner in that criteria. Oh, right. Okay. down, you hold me down, but hey, I freaking landed a combo, dropped you, then landed 5 elbows to your head. You reverse and end up on top, then you know what? That doesn't matter. You may have had octagon control, but that is not in our criteria of the way that we score. Right? Number one, you're right. Damage, intent to finish the fight.
So have you actually been in the ring where the decision went against? I mean, you mentioned the bare-knuckle first fight. I mean, that other fight that was judged against you. But has it happened to you before where you're in the ring and you thought you were going to win or thought you deserved to win? You were surprised?
I generally, which trips me out when I see people the other way, but I always think I'm going to lose. So but anytime it's ever gone, I assume I'm losing.
That's a lot of alcoholics and addicts have that kind of attitude about themselves. Yeah, I'm like that too.
But that's that's the whole thing, man. Don't leave it to the judges. Don't you have to make that call, because you're going to be you're going to get your heart broke. You know what? And the only thing I hate more than that is the fighters that it's always somebody to blame. The ref stopped it too early. The judges weren't right on that call. They should have took a point, or even my coach didn't coach right. So this thing, to be a judge and a referee, you pretty much got to have thick skin. And I think that one thing that where I'm lucky is having been a fighter. Most guys go, well, shit, if Chris stopped my fight, I was probably getting beat up pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How about this? Quick judging.
Go ahead, Mike.
Las Vegas, I'm cage side, one of the Ultimate Fighters, Dante Rivera is fighting. Forget who he was fighting at this point. And there is a judge, and she's a very well-known Las Vegas female judge. She has what appears to be her child with her sitting cage side. In the middle of Dante Rivera's fight, her child is acting up, causing attention. The mother who's sitting cage side, judging the fight, is speaking and reprimanding and conversing with her child during pivotal moments of the fight. Dante goes on to lose that fight by decision.
Wow.
His whole livelihood, double his purse, right? You know how this goes. Half his money to show up and half the money if he got the win, completely wiped away because of that type of unprofessional behavior, which is not uncommon, unfortunately. I wish there were more guys judges, guys and gals like Chris, who actually came from the sport. And I think that's something Rogan talks about also. You have to have an understanding. You have to be 100% into it. And what I see in Vegas might be the worst of all the states I've personally been around. Their judges seem to be grandfathered in from a million years ago, carried over from boxing, who still don't understand MMA and the differences of techniques and rules and a ring generalship, all the things that we're talking about. But I saw that firsthand. And Dante actually, I believe, should have won the fight and wound up losing. And she actually scored him to be losing that fight, by the way.
So, and I'm lucky in the way that I've got Jason Herzog, Mike Beltran, Herb Dean. These are the guys that how to judge. I did Herb Dean's course, and these are the guys I'm next to every day. Unfortunately, I know a lot of states they don't have that. I have a way that I judge, which you wouldn't understand it if you saw it, but I have a way of taking notes without ever taking my eyes off the fight. Yeah. So I'm constantly, I have a paper in front of me, right? And that way it's like cliff notes for me too, because that way after the fight, if you come to me and you go, hey, 4th fight of the night, 2nd round, you judged it this way. Why? I can go, I judged it this way because he scored 2 takedowns and he was looking for the arm bar. He did this, he did that. I always judge a fight, and this may sound weird, in a manner that I need to be able to defend my score. If I can't defend my score, I judge that fight wrong. That's my opinion. I have to have ground to stand on. Now, if you judge a fight differently than me, I want you to defend your score. And there have been cases we do that camo here in California, where after the fight, the judges, we get together and we go, hey, you two guys scored the fight different. Explain to me why.
Oh, great.
Every committee is doing that. You need to be able to say, I scored that fight this way and here's why.
But Chris and Mike, how can a fighter, I just don't understand it myself because I obviously never fought, but how can a fighter accept a judge's score if the judge has never fought before? Like, isn't there a kind of, you don't really know what I feel. You've never actually been in the ring. Maybe you've watched a lot of fights, but it's different. I don't know. I'm just saying for I've been saying this in bodybuilding too. In bodybuilding, a lot of the judges are not bodybuilders whatsoever. So I sometimes think that at the very least, the guy competing doesn't respect the call as much. Do you guys feel that way in fighting, or is it not? Is it sort of a science where anybody can judge it really?
No.
I don't think to be a coach, for example, you have to have been a great fighter. I don't think to be a ref. I do think you have to have been a martial artist at least. You have to have competed. You have to understand. So there has to be some level of embeddedness in sports. How much so, that's a tough call to make. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if you haven't been embedded in the sport your whole life, why are you judging it in the first place?
Exactly, that's very true. Well, Chris and Mike, I got to tell you guys, because we've been an hour and a half, I think, so I thought we would cut it short a bit now. But I have actually, Mike, I didn't send you the other topics. I have a bunch of other topics I wanted to ask you about, Chris. So I was wondering, maybe you have some time later, we could have you back on and we could discuss like PEDs in the sport and taking care of athletes and stuff like that. Some other topics.
100%.
Well, it was a great honor, Chris, to have you. I can't thank Mike enough for bringing you on. It's great to talk to you both.
Great. Good to talk to you. And Mike, man, miss you, brother. Hope you're doing well, dude.
Life is good, my man. Yep, absolutely. One of these days, bro, we'll hook up. I'm going to pop up in a SoCal probably sometime in the wintertime. I'm going to give you a ring.
Oh,
Please
great.
do.
Well, you have to give me a ring too. We're close by. I'm just above you in Irvine.
You guys, I keep forgetting. Leo, for some reason, I picture you in Texas. I don't know why.
Because I want to be in Texas. I live in, my soul is in Texas, but my body's here.
You give the Texas aura for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to move.
I know where I'm opening a gym, actually.
Where?
Are you familiar with, it used to be called Worlds in San Diego?
Yeah, it's a famous World's Gym, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the 3rd floor of the whole thing.
Oh, so, wow. That's
so I'm in the process of building it out right now. It's going to be sweet.
Heck yeah, brother.
Because you left the other gym, I think it's called the arena right after COVID started, unfortunately, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to know you're building your own gym, and we'll be happy to promote it on the channel once it's built as well.
Please do. Right on. Okay.
Anyway, guys, I'll talk to you later.
All
Have a great Friday.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.